Good afternoon, everybody. Salam, everybody. It's lovely that you're all here. And you are a special group because you've managed to resist the temptations of overeating at the lunch. And you've managed to actually find us as well here. So you are a specially selected group. Where's me cards? Right. Right. Now, this is the session where we are looking at Qatar's ecology and discussing
of what
a little
may lie in store for other places on Earth in just a few.
A little of the work that has been going on. And we have a great many friends in the audience. Dr. Jassim at the back from QU and our Portuguese contingent, Pedro and Alexandra. They always go in pairs, Portuguese people, so they can protect each other. Without further ado, I think my name is Dr. Alex Amato. I have been involved with ecologists. Although my background is architecture, I have had a very keen interest in ecology always. And since coming to Qatar 13, getting on nearly for 14 years ago, I have always been interested in the terrestrial ecology in particular, and obviously was pleased to learn in this 13 years of the absolutely outstanding work that has gone on in Qatar on the marine side as well. So I'd first of all like to introduce Dr. Aspasia. She has been a friend for, I don't know, I think a good part of those 14 years. She introduced me to the beauty of bacterial mats, which are an acquired taste, but certainly interesting. And then what we have to do is thank them, the cyanobacteria, because something like, I can't remember the exact figures, but something like an eon or so ago, maybe it was 2, it was cyanobacteria that actually changed the atmosphere, pumped a lot more oxygen into the atmosphere, killed off a lot of things that couldn't take oxygen, but actually spurred if you like, the explosion of species development, etc., that went with the Cambrian period, I believe. Right. Or perhaps just immediately pre-Cambrian. Right. Asper, would you like to come up to the stage? All right. Thank you. Have a seat, Asper. Okay. I'd now like to introduce Jassim, who I have met recently, but I have been absolutely amazed at his energy and is at the ministry, who are doing absolutely genuinely great things. And he's going to be here today to tell us, what is going on. Jassim, it's pretty much that you're on the marine side, but the terrestrial side is desperately important as well. It should not be, it's a bit of a Cinderella, but, Jassim and Asper are here to actually make the difference. Okay, and then I would like to introduce Dr. Manjula. And wait a minute, I have a little card. Oh, yes. So Dr. Manjula Tiwari is a marine turtle scientist affiliated with NOAA in the United States. And NOAA stands for exactly what, Manjula? Okay, I hope you all got that. She has been because you'll be tested afterwards. She has been working on sea turtle research and conservation issues all over the world for over 30 years. In this region, she has been working on sea turtles in Oman, and we have a gentleman here from Oman, I can see, for the past 15 years. And what I would say is that we do have turtle and an interest in turtle sanctuaries in Qatar, very near Fuarit, etc., which is, a lovely place on the coast. Okay. And last but not least, I would like to introduce Dr. Van Dam. Is committed to enhancing protection of species and human livelihoods, working with local communities, co-learning on sustainable resources use and climate resilience. He's authored over 80 scientific publications and books, and is a scientific researcher and natural history consultant. And in particular, I think I can maybe mention your deep interest in Sumatra, an island that is truly magical off the coast of the Arabian Peninsula. And he'll tell us a little bit about that. But I think the community side is particularly important, especially because really it's only by engaging with the local community, you get that interest and respect for local ecology and then conservation, and then you can go on and with restoration, etc. So that's a particular importance. Now, I'd now, without further ado, call upon Dr. Asper to give us a short presentation.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well? Okay, great. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm very happy that even though we're one of the last panels, you beat the bullet and came. And we, on purpose, scheduled this event to talk about the desert on an outside court so you can feel the burn. So I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank the audience. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank everyone who organized this. This is a wild beast of a summit, and it takes the work of many, many people. I want to thank Qatar Foundation and EarthNow for commissioning the report that many of us have worked on, and will keep on working on it. And I want to thank our co-authors and our nature. Nature is the most important thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you out of the urban setting for a little bit for a virtual tour, because those of you who are friends of mine know that I'm not an urbanite. And then I'm going to very briefly present some of our the purpose of the report and some of our key findings so far. It's going to be very, 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 very brief, but we have prepared a brief summary report that is available on the summit's website if you are interested in reading something over the weekend. So let's get out of Musharib and go into my car, which is very dirty and desert-beaten, and take Al-Shamal. What do we see around us? We see buildings and the asphalt, right? And then as we move away, going north, we start seeing other colors. So light brown and rocks, that's the rocky desert. It's not a creative name, it is what it is. And then we see some green spots. And then we see these rauda or roda, which in Arabic means gardens. And this is how they look during the summertime, dusty and very brown. But after the rains, they look like, ta-da! So this is, now that we're on Al-Shamal on March 9th, we would be seeing these kinds of raudas. We will not see this on our drive, but we also have caves in Qatar. We also have jebels, and we also have sand dunes. And in these terrestrial ecosystems, terrestrial means land ecosystem, we have a motley crew of different organisms. So you can see this is a sandcat, scorpions, different kinds of birds, foxes, the oryx, the Faroe owl eagle, and one of my favorite co-explorers, the greater hoopoe lark. And then if we reach Altakira, which is one of the protected areas in Qatar, we see this from an aerial view. And so, again, it's the dominating light brown, and this is what we call the sabha, or the salt flat. So it's very salty, very dry. And then you see here and in this area that we have the intertidal ecosystem where the water comes in and out twice a day. And then you have beautiful river-like channels and a very thick mangrovial forest. Now, if we were to borrow Pedro's scuba gear, we would be able to dive deeper into the Gulf and see seagrass beds and coral reefs. And this is the community of organisms that grow in, live, make their home in these ecosystems, in the coastal marine ecosystems. So you have the dugong or the sea cow, you have the whale shark and the hawksbill turtle, and this is what we call the charismatic species. And they're being quote unquote exploited in a good way. Their conservation means that a lot of other species will be conserved as well and protected. So about a year ago in May, Alex and I were discussing this issue that, you know, what's going on with the more the terrestrial ecology in Qatar, because the marine has benefited from the spotlight more. And we decided to write, we were commissioned to write a report on Qatar's ecology with an assessment and recommendations. And we made it difficult for ourselves and our co-authors, and we did not only check out the terrestrial, the urban, and the coastal marine environments, but we looked at the environment and ecology from many different perspectives. So climate, geology and water resources, law and ethics, education, economics, and ecotourism. And I counted our co-authors, and we have 44 co-authors in all these teams, and I have their names here before I go into what we found in the report. So for the terrestrial, urban, coastal marine, and the economics teams, what we found was that we are missing important information on the status of the habitats, on the status of the biodiversity, so the species that live in those habitats. We do not have a centralized species database, and we do not have an assessment of desert-specific ecosystem functions. And this is not a Qatar-specific problem, it's a desert-specific problem. And many of the gaps that we have found are not Qatar-specific. This is what we face in a global scale. But we have identified these problems specific to Qatar, how they look in Qatar. And you will ask, why do we care about the current status of the habitats? Because if we do not know that, we will not know exactly the extent of their loss. If we do not know the status of biodiversity, we will not know what is the abundance and their distribution in these habitats. And if we do not have a centralized database, then we cannot run a risk analysis to see which are the species that are in need of immediate risk, of help, conservation. And of course, the economics part is that if we don't have an understanding of the ecosystem functions, we don't know how much to cost the environmental impacts that any new development will incur, and we cannot assign penalties money that can be funneled back into conservation efforts. So what we have done is a preliminary analysis for habitat loss. We have gotten historical aerial images from different locations in 3 different times in the past. And we have done this for the Rauda ecosystem, and you can see that on the table on the bottom right, you can see that in these selected areas, we have lost about 73% of the Rauda, which is, by the way, the most productive ecosystem in the desert, and it's the food court, if you will, of many, many different species. In the marine environment, we're facing the same problem, and I'm showing you here a map of the Arabian Gulf, and the dots signify locations of coral reefs, and we have lost in the last years up to 70% of the coral cover, and currently in Qatar, only about 2.1% is covered with corals, and all the near-shore corals are dead. That's due to development and to climate warming. And then this is a figure for the mangroves. And again, you see, this is interesting actually. If you can pay attention to the table, you see it was 5 kilometers squared, the area, then it dropped in 71, and then there was an uptick in 95. Do you know why that was? What happened in Qatar in the 1980s? They figured out that the ecosystem services provided by the mangroves are very essential, so they had a campaign to plant. And then there is a drop again by 2023, primarily because the Simaisma mangrove was cut down to create a family beach. With my colleagues, we also curated a list of species living in Qatar from very disparate sources. And we ran an analysis using different conservation criteria. When we didn't have this information, we used other uses for these species so that we do the weighted ranking. And we found that about, and this is for the terrestrial ecosystems, we found that 34 species are ranked as high or immediate risk, and that's priority, and about 160 are at moderate risk. And these are species that either grow in the terrestrial environment or they use the terrestrial environment for part of their life cycle. We're now developing the same list for the marine ecology environment. And now, the marine environment, not the marine ecology environment. And now I'm going to take you to the abiotics of an ecosystem. And I'm saying habitat. Habitat is the physical space. When you're bringing in the weather, the climate conditions, and the organisms, that's when you have an ecosystem. So historical records show that for Qatar in general, there is a 1% increase in the mean annual temperature when we're talking about the country as a whole. But if we're talking about Doha in isolation, there has been a 3.6 degrees increase. And a little bit of gloom and doom. It's not going to get cooler anytime soon. So this is the analysis that our climate scientists have run. So the mean annual surface temperature will increase under all 3 different scenarios. The heat stress index will increase, and the days of danger category are going to increase. So now you have in your head that, oh my God, what are we going to do when this temperature increases? you're like, okay, I'm going to go to my house and put on my AC and I'm going to be okay. But what about the species that do not have access to an air conditioning? They will have to either suffer mortalities or travel to another higher altitude place where they experience lower temperatures. But is this a possibility in Qatar? No. Then in terms of rain, our annual average rainfall in the historical record, which starts at 1960, is about 78 millimeters a year. And through the time, we see that it might increase by 2080, and I'm sure I'm not going to be here to experience this increase in rainfall. I don't know about you. We're going to be getting 110 millimeters of rainfall in Qatar, which will turn us from a hyper-arid country to an arid country. And those that are going to be there then, and if the projections turn true, they may experience a Qatar that was like that 6,000 years ago. So we had surface waters back then, and which they dried. So let me take you to the urban ecology chapter. And of course, we don't know too much about the urban ecology in Qatar, although there are many parks and there are plans to connect the parks. But nothing has happened yet. And then in terms of the urban agriculture, which is very attractive for those farms to be connected to green parks, it's the agricultural sector that has damaged our groundwater and has turned it from fresh to brackish. So we have identified that this is something that needs to be regulated, their consumption. In the education department, a lot of good things are happening at the policy level, both from the Ministry of Education and Qatar Foundation. There is something that was identified, that there is a need to train the teachers on the ways to incorporate sustainability in the regular curricula. And I know from our colleagues that Qatar Foundation is going to hold training sessions with the Cloud Institute to start in June for that purpose. The National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan had suggested that extracurricular education needs to be part of the regular curricula, and this is where these frameworks are coming from. And then some bright examples of extracurricular activities that are also covering a need, a local knowledge need that we have in Qatar is the Eco Schools package for the coastal and marine environment, and content from Flowered Spring and their program Eco Kids. And another very good example is Dadu's effort with Qatar Natural History Group, which is an NGO, and their collaboration with the Ministry of Environment on the conservation of the turtles. They were providing tours and educational material to the community. And these are two examples of what we consider good ecotourism. The one to the left is the Aquasport camp, which provides a cultural experience for the people, but also an exploration of the marine environment on kayaks, so it brings them out to nature. And they are stewards of local nature conservation. They lack the educational aspect in their activities, so that's something to improve. And then I'm also showing you on the right a public exhibition that will open next week in Altakira. And it's a good example for me because an ecologist was employed to do an environmental impact assessment of the exhibition on the natural environment and the operations and monitoring while the exhibition is going. And the topic of the exhibition is on climate change awareness. So we need artists to start doing this. Now, in terms of law, we have observed that the legislature and all the strategies and the policies that are in place in Qatar are exemplar. And so when we're gonna have a conservation strategy and action plan, we are gonna be able to scaffold it to these policies and laws. And this is my last slide, I promise. So something that is lost on us in general is that you cannot be talking about environmental sustainability or sustainability if you do not have a healthy nature. So nature should be first, and we should know what nature looks like around us. And I'm gonna leave you with this slide so you can read it. And I want to thank you for listening and for helping us with this endeavor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asper. This is truly wide-ranging and difficult task in that there are many, many, many authors, and at times Dr. Asper has been telling me that it's very much like herding cats, but everybody has contributed or is about to contribute. I would especially like to say that our colleague Sarah here is the expert on the urban ecology, which is perhaps a new area that we're very interested in. And what we aim to do with this is that there are many views you can see from ecotourism, education, ethics and law, economics. There is a multiple way that you can view the ecosystem. It's not just about what is there, etc. And that's important so we get those perspectives. Now, without further ado, I would like to then turn to Jassim from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, who's going to tell us now a little bit about all the good work that is going on from the Ministry. Thank you.
Thank you for having me today to briefly overview the efforts of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change to conserve the marine environment. So can we have the table of content, please? Yeah, over there. Okay, so I will start discussing about one misconceptions about biodiversity in arid region with simple definitions, biodiversity in Qatar, and a brief overview, some of our current conservation projects and future plans. So I always like start to give simple definitions about what I'm about to discuss. So the arid environments, of course, are those environments characterized by little precipitation, high evaporation rates, and extreme weather. And biodiversity, in simple terms, meaning all forms of life in a particular place and a particular time. And that being said, I want to highlight one thing, that there is a misunderstanding there, or misconception, that biodiversity, that arid environments like deserts don't contain biodiversity, and this is something totally incorrect. In fact, arid country or arid environments, arid countries like Qatar contain and sustain many biodiversity, many species, 28 of them considered rare, as we can see. So biodiversity in Qatar, and as statistics, our 2013 statistics shows that the terrestrial, we have 1,101 species, terrestrial species, and this representing 53% of the Qatar's biodiversity, 967 marine species, representing the other 47% of our biodiversity. Okay. So I will start discussing a few of our initiatives to conserve the wildlife here in Qatar. For instance, we'll start with the hawksbill turtle protection project in Qatar. This project started in 2003, and it's a collaboration between us and the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change and the ESC, the Environment Science Center at Qatar University. This project, of course, contains a lot of research activities, monitoring the mother turtles coming to the beach for laying their eggs, taking measurements, reallocating the eggs partially or completely, eggs incubations, and releasing the turtles or the hatchlings into the wild. There are quite interesting findings. We allocated 8 nesting sites of hawksbill sea turtle. 6 of them coastal, 2 islands, 2 of which having over the half of the nestings, Fuerit and Ras Lafan. And since 2016, we noticed that the number of the nests and also hatchlings stays constant, which is a positive sign. But actually our aim is larger than this, and that is to improve the IUCN status of the hawksbill sea turtle in the state of Qatar from critically endangered to endangered to vulnerable, and this is our ultimate goal. A second pioneer and unique project that the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change is supervising is a monitoring project conducted by a group of scientists and experts from Qatar University, monitoring the whale shark in our territorial waters, especially in the northeast. The aim of this project is to estimate the population of the whale shark in our territorial water whenever we encounter them, determine their demographics, as well as the zooplankton diversity upon which they are feeds. Um, and after finishing the last season, actually, we collected a very, very interesting data that suggests that most of the whale sharks remains, for instance, within the Gulf after the aggregation periods, peaking in July and August. Moving far to the west near to Kuwait and far to the east near to Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, so, and we noticed also that some of them remains in our territorial Qatar, our territorial water in Qatar, which is, we consider them like typically a Qatari whale shark. So our future plans and projects, okay, so our plan, we submitted a draft actually, and it's under a study now, is to designate 30% of our land and our seas as a protected area by law. And also it's to sign more MOUs and to start a mangrove restoration projects hopefully this year with our strategic partners in Qatar University and IRTHNA. It's also to establish a research and rehabilitation center where we can conduct more research, more marine research, and rehabilitate wounded and young marine reptiles and mammals. Yes, that being said, yeah, just like last words, the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change attaches a great importance to restoration and conservation efforts, and also agrees with the community, with the international community, about the importance of holding and reversing the biodiversity laws through implementing various programs, projects, and also by enforcing the environmental laws. The laws actually that affected millions of people around the world today and expected to be even worse in the future. So, that will require, of course, all of us to cooperate by all various means. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jassim, and I think you can. This attests to the absolute first-rate work that Qatar is doing at government level, and indeed through many of the ecologists, some of you here today. Now, I would like to then call on Dr. Manjula. She has been working on turtles, as we've said before. I just want to put you in mind of those really nice films that you may have seen, where the little turtles hatch and they come out, and they kind of instinctively know that they're going to head towards the sea. You see them struggle, and some of them, it's endearing, and you think they've just got to get to the sea, and then a big frigate bird comes down and eats them. So that's a kind of sad ending, but there are many, 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 many of them, and then some of them do get through and become big turtles. Anyway, Manjula, over to you.
Thank you, Alex. I hope my presentation won't leave you in tears. So building on the excellent presentations by my two colleagues, I will focus on sea turtles. And I would like to highlight the important role Qatar plays in regional sea turtle conservation efforts. So let's start with the emblematic sea turtle species of Qatar, the hawksbill. And if you take a look at the map on the right of your screen, those black lines are essentially migrations of hawksbill turtles fitted with satellite transmitters on different nesting beaches in different countries in the region. And the basic take-home message is that turtles don't respect political boundaries. They move across the waters of many countries. So while Qatar hosts a regionally important nesting population of the critically endangered hawksbill, as Jassim just mentioned, Qatar also hosts foraging hawksbills that come from other countries. Similarly, the green turtles we find in Qatar's waters, these are juvenile green turtles, so obviously they have hatched in another country because there is no green turtle nesting as far as we know in Qatar. Also, loggerhead sea turtles that we find here in Qatari waters, they have come up all the way from Oman to feed. And Oman is a globally important loggerhead nesting population, which is also declining. So Qatar's conservation efforts in its waters has a very important role to play regionally in sea turtle conservation efforts. And there is a need for a joint responsibility and strategy regionally to conserve the sea turtles. And here is a wonderful opportunity for Qatar to take leadership in this role. Now, the complex life history of sea turtles between the ocean and the land exposes them to many threats. And as you can see on the slide here, some of the threats are coastal development, destruction of nesting habitats, bycatch in fisheries, marine pollution, and of course, that horrible word, climate change, and rising temperatures and change in ocean dynamics. And this is by no means a comprehensive list of threats that sea turtles face. So the important question is, what do we do today, or what do we need to do today for tomorrow's sea turtles? And I'd like to tell you a story from early on in my career. One of the projects I work on is in a remote corner of Indonesia. And when I first went out to that nesting beach about 20 years ago, I was welcomed with a lunch of juicy shrimp. And I indulged myself with a guilt-free conscience because I knew that those shrimp had not been caught in any destructive trawlers. So I had my lunch, and then I decided to ask what traditional method had been used to catch those shrimp. And the fisherman looked at me and said, I threw insecticide in the water and scooped up all the dead shrimp that floated to the surface. And I was horrified, and he didn't understand my reaction. His comment was, Madam, insecticide is for insects. You are not an insect, so it will not do you any harm. And I realized then that however one may choose to judge the local logic, this was the human context, the misconceptions, the perceptions within which conservation needed to be done. And more recently, I surveyed 36 colleagues in 24 countries that I work in, people who work on sea turtle management, and I asked them that same question. What do we need to do today for tomorrow's turtles? And I asked them to rank their priorities. And their highest priority was stakeholder engagement. And what is meant by stakeholder engagement is basically engagement by you, by me, by fishermen, by local communities, politicians, scientists, the general public, everybody, regardless of where you live. Even if you live in a country without ocean borders, you have an impact on the marine system. And so this concept is very eloquently captured in this quote by the president of Rwanda, where he says, the business of conservation is everyone's business. And now how do we get all these different people involved in sea turtle conservation or marine conservation? I think Jane Goodall responded to that question very well yesterday when she said, it all depends on the local context. It all depends on the local groups that you are working with. It has to be tailored on a case-by-case basis. In the country you're in the cultural context you're in the socio-economic context you're in. And so there is no one size that fits all. And in fact, conservation is much more than science and biology. It is psychology, it is religion, it is spirituality, it is law, it is national policy, and much, much more. And it is within this complex framework that we have to find solutions that are holistic, balanced, and very importantly, realistic. And getting people to realize that their welfare is at the heart of this conservation effort is really important to getting their buy-in, because what affects people personally is finally what brings about the greatest behavior change. And I like to end on this quote by these authors, Wright et al., where they said, without the ability to influence human behavior, a conservationist role will likely be limited to that of describing the loss of biodiversity and the decline of the environment. And I like to rephrase that and say, if you cannot change human behavior, then future generations will just be drawing pictures of sea turtles in the sand, of turtles that once were and are no more. So with that, I leave you and happy to answer questions later. Thank you.
Well, it was sort of a sad ending, Manjula, but anyway. Dr. Van Dam, over to you, please, and tell us all the exciting work that's going on, and indeed perhaps some of the wonders of Sumatra. Okay.
Thank you very much. Trying to... Oh, how do I go back? It's here? Okay, this is okay. Thank you all for staying here in the in the hot noon in Doha. So this, thank you very much for attending the lecture. I want to take you for a second out of this place, but within a similar environment related to heat, to Socotra Island, which is situated in the Western Indian Ocean, just off the Horn of Africa, and which is the largest island of the Arabian Peninsula, and which is an old piece of the southern margin of Arabia that broke off between 30 and 18 million years ago. And while it actually broke off during the opening of the Gulf of Aden, it brought like a ship, like an Ark of Noah, lots of species with it that were present in the area before aridification started. Some of these species evolved to different groups and radiated. Others fled to the mountains of Socotra. So Socotra has huge endemism in plants and animals that is unrivaled in actually most of Asia. The mountains of Socotra have a larger number of endemic plants per square kilometer than any other place in Asia. That's not only Middle Asia, but entire Asia. So it's extreme island endemism. There's about 100,000 people living there, of which a large amount is based in 2 cities, and most people in the countryside are working on herders and fishermen, mostly both, switching between both depending on the seasons. Most of the island is protected by national law in Yemen, but also internationally recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a UNESCO Man and Biosphere Reserve. And as you see in green is core area, which is more than 70% of the land, and then a large part of the sea. Socotra is home to the last and only dragon's blood tree forest in the world. So people know the dragon blood trees also from other places, but in Socotra it's the only place where the ecosystem of a dense forest still exists. And this forest is an example of also harboring many species that only live in this forest. And there's examples there of different endemic species among reptiles, which has 90% endemism, birds, which have 1 out of 5 of every resident bird in Socotra is as to number of species, is an endemic, and 98% of the more than 100 species of mollusks are endemic. So whenever you walk in Socotra, you have to be careful not to kill a highly sensitive endemic species, and not only endemic to the island, but mostly endemic to a very specific area on the island itself. is just also to show that in arid countries, because Yemen is also arid environment, there can be a huge biodiversity if the environment is there. But there's something different in Socotra as opposed to other islands in the world where there has been huge extinctions. Everybody knows the dodo, it's just one of the examples, but islands are very known for extinction. In fact, more than 90% of all extinctions in birds and reptiles in the world have happened on islands. And this is because humans, when they come, people, not only the long isolation of the island itself, but also the people that live there. And this is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the Socotri people who live on this island with limited resources, who have their own very specific culture, their own very specific language. And what is very specific about them is the originally very strong culture between man and nature. And this is something that is very rare to see in many other places, and something we miss, for example, in Europe, is this spiritual bond between man and nature that we all try to regain. But there it's still in the core of the culture itself. It's in the language and it's in the practices. And I just want to show you three main products from the island that have had, and to some extent have had global value, which is dragon's blood from the dragon's blood tree, aloe from the aloes, and then incense from the Socotra frankincense trees. Aloe, at some point, the entire global market of aloe was only coming from Socotra before it came from other places. In fact, in Europe, there is the synonym of aloe is Socotrin. And in old pharmacies in Europe, you can still see Socotrin in some cupboards, which was a synonym for aloe. Dragon's blood as well was a huge commodity in ancient times. And now, as in ancient times, but still now, on Socotra, they use these resins and these plant products for medicine and for other things. I brought a small pot which is ornamented by Socotran dragon's blood, and I brought some dragon's blood and some incense. If people want to smell or feel or taste it, you can. I have some with me. So there's a strong connection between man and nature on Socotra, and it's this human nature bond which is extremely important in any conservation activity. But in every story there is a villain, and there's in every good story there's a villain. And this is a picture of a frankincense forest in Socotra. So again, every frankincense tree you see in Socotra is endemic, only living there. Some of them in very small populations. And this is a forest in Home Hill in 1999 when I was there for the first time. And here's the villain. This is the same forest in 2019, between 2019 and 2022. So again, just to understand the impact of climate change. So the villain is climate change, but behind it is all of us. So in Socotra, the climate change is showing itself in the form of extreme weather conditions, longer droughts, stronger droughts, but also really violent cyclones. In fact, this cyclone in 2015, the two cyclones, and the one in 2018 afterwards also hit the Arabian Peninsula, and the first ones also hit Oman and had caused some damage there. But on Socotra, it caused damage to biodiversity, to livelihoods. And the problem is, because of the aridity and because of the grazing effects of livestock, there is no chance for regeneration of these trees. In the small graph up there, you can actually see prediction using satellite images since the 50s until now. There was already a decline of these trees just because there's little regeneration, but then after the hit of the cyclones, the predicted extinction of this population in Home Hill is 2036. So it's in most of our lifetimes. I mean, in our lifetime, we will see the extinction of this specific local population. That's pretty fast. And the more positive calculation is 2065. So still, very soon, which means the moment to act is really now, not tomorrow, not the day after, but really now. Every moment counts. And the local people, so every story has a villain and a champion. Here are the champions. So during the last years, I've been working in Socotra for over 20 years now, visiting not permanently there, but trying first as a biologist helping to explore, but then afterwards moving into conservation. We have projects in helping to regenerate the trees, and these projects are driven and asked by the local people who say, we do not want to lose these trees, we do not want to lose the use of this incense. They are linked to the cultural identity not only of the Socotrans, but actually of people in the entire region, because the dragon's blood tree, as you know, is almost symbolic, a national symbol for Yemen, but almost a national symbol or an international symbol for the entire commitment of local populations and local people, indigenous people, to grow these plants. It takes a lot of care, and you see here Mona, she is one of our gardeners. She has her own nursery growing small boswellia, small frankincense trees. And then you see the schools helping to grow the frankincense trees in their school grounds, and then we have different strategies to restore them in their natural environment. These frankincense trees grow very fast. With good watering, you can have a proper tree in 6 years, which is actually very good. But the dragon's blood tree takes 100 to 150 years to be an adult tree that can bloom and produce seeds. So it means this is a multi-generational commitment that needs another type of thinking. If you want to restore vegetation, coastal or inland for long term, you need to take into account that it's the indigenous population that needs to be able to take care of it, because otherwise it's not possible. Conservation is not about taking care of the tree, it's taking care of the person that takes care of the tree. So, and this is almost my last slide. So this is just examples of some of the activities. So we have a successful regenerated mangrove plot, which is completely in the hands of the local community, and they take care of it. It's relatively low cost because the community really themselves take care of this plot. Then there's a lot of awareness activities, mainly through our working together with women NGOs, because in Socotra it's definitely the women who transfer the knowledge to the next generation and who are in charge of education towards the children. And then working together with scientists, facilitating and helping the local communities or the indigenous communities in having also the updated and new tools to assess how fast the rate of decline is, so they can act consciously and with the right data and the right training. So, and I want to end with this. I also want to thank the organizers and Earthna for having me here, and I want to thank the former Minister of Water and Environment, Dr. Abdulrahman Al-Iriani, for all the help and the work for all these years to help Socotra. And I want to show this particular image to say that Socotra is kind of a metaphor for our entire planet. It has, in fact, a limited amount of resources. It's a limited space, but on an island you are very aware of it, because if you overuse the resources, you overuse everything, and it comes back to you as a person. And in Socotra, this is very tangible, so people had rules for a long time to actually manage the land. So central can be the tree, but in fact what is central is the person on the right who is taking care of the young trees. And this is the take-home message. Thank you very much.
Now, we have time for just some very brief questions, and I really do mean very brief. I don't want a long question at all. This gentleman here from Oman.
Okay, I'll go straight. I just want to have a comment and maybe want to raise a voice. We know that unfortunately some people, they are not behave as a part of the ecosystem. They behave that we are owning the ecosystem, and unfortunately we are not owning the ecosystem, we are part of it. You talk about ecotourism, and ecotourism need to be well governed. Otherwise, it is the big threat on biodiversity more than the climate change. I will give two examples in Oman for fauna and flora. For example, about turtles. Unfortunately, some tourists, they steal the eggs of the turtles, and even some of them, even they sell them. And also, some of the tourists, they go at night, and in early morning, in the hatching and the activity of these turtles, to take photos with flashes, etc., and that disturbing them. I will not continue on this, but anyway, I'll give another example on flora. In Jabal Akhdar, it is about 2,000, 3,000 above sea levels in Oman. We have many rare plant species. One of them, al-ilan, which is juniper, and the other one is al-itim, which is a kind of wild olives. Okay, a decade before, the government opened it for tourism, and there is a two direct and indirect negative impact on the ecosystem of these two plants. These plants, some of them are more than 300 years old. The indirect impact, as you know, is throwing trash, etc., and also roaming around with off-road bikes and off-road drive cars. But the direct impact, unfortunately, recently, what people go there, they start to weeding them. They start to cut them for wood, and then they use it for barbecue there. And unfortunately, some of them leave their barbecue without distinguish it. So what happened, we have a lot of fires and then reported there in Jabal Akhdar, which burn a complete plant, which is 300 or 400 years old. Okay, I mean, all of you know the rule that if we go there as an ecotourist, we should not leave anything except our footprint. We should not take anything except our photos. But it is not implemented. The law is there, the regulation is there by the government, but we need a practical implementation. And I think it is time to have eco-police. That is my voice.
Thank you very much. I shall not throw that. Jassim, you very quickly.
Yes, or we call them rangers. Yes, absolutely. Like during the nesting period of our beloved hawksbill sea turtle. Well, I can ensure you, sir, one thing that most of our like nesting sites are fenced, protected during the whole season. So rarely we see someone like trying to go and to like dig and take out the eggs. That's almost impossible here in Qatar. Also, we noticed that there are some activities going on near the whale shark, for example, and the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change communicated with these tourism companies, and we had a good talk with them. So eventually soon, we will have some laws and regulations regulates these tourism activities near any hotspot sites. Yes, thank you.
Okay, just to add, I couldn't agree with you more. Ecotourism really does need to be thought through very, very, very carefully. And sometimes it means, sadly, because people love to see nature. I mean, some people are genuinely interested and want to. I mean, I want to go out and serve. You know, when Manjula tells me about the little turtles, I want to go out and save them so they all get to the sea. But you can't do that, as ecotourism means that restraint, really. So there is a very, very, very crucial balance to be achieved, and indeed enforcement absolutely is a must, and that will mean restraint. Now, I believe there's a question from an extremely young gentleman who's going to be a world-leading ecologist, no doubt. What is it, sir?
I wanted to ask if you think it's also important to address the hunting crisis or the problem with hunting going on here, because hunting is a big problem here, wildlife hunting.
Right, okay. Culturally sensitive question there. How can I deal with that? Well, I will decline to answer that question, other than I don't hunt myself. Never have done. My father-in-law, God bless him when he was alive, was in fact a very famous veterinary surgeon in the UK, but regularly went out shooting pheasants at the weekend. I could never quite square the circle. You know, he sort of saved the animals during the week, but shot the hell out of them during the weekend. I think I can't answer that question. I think it is a difficult one, and it is a one about local customs, etc. These will evolve, okay, much like us as a species. That's it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you all for coming.